Hi, we will be starting the Power BI embedded demo by creating an Azure tenant. This is necessary for people that don't have elevated privileges or want to test Power BI. And in my case, I'm not a global Azure admin, so I need to do this step. The users who are doing this for their typical Azure accounts can skip over these steps, but it's good to watch to understand what is happening. So I'm going to open a browser. And then I'm going to go to portal.azure.com. Once here, I'm going to click on the hamburger menu in the top and select Create a Resource. I'm going to type in Azure Active Directory, which should pop up, and you can click on this and then click the Create button. So I'm going to call this a test tenant, so I'll call it Atom Embedded Tenant. See if that name is taken, and we'll see what happens. Okay, so my name is available, so I'm going to hit the create button. I will pause the video, and then when we come back, we'll go ahead and create a user. Okay, my tenant has been created, and I'm going to show you how to create a user. Typically, this user is already created. They're called your Azure Global Admin, but I'm going to create one so we can manage the resources. So I'm going to click here to manage the new directory, which will switch over to the new tenant that has been created. And if you need to do this manually, you can click on some of the directories and subscriptions, and you'll see under all directories, you'll see this new tenant. I'm not going to click over there. So the first thing we're going to do is create a user. And this is my current Microsoft user, but what I want to do is create an internal user to this tenant. So I'm going to create a user, my first last name, and go ahead and type my name again. I'm going to let me create a password. So, okay. And now I'm going to add my role to change my role from a user to a global admin. This is going to save me a lot of steps in terms of security, but when you're going ahead and configuring Power BI Embedded, you will need a global admin to help you through the process, and I will call that out in the documentation. So now I'm going to hit create, and it will take a few minutes to create a user and propagate. So I'm going to wait for the user to propagate, and then I'm going to log back into the portal with my new user. So I'm going to copy my username so I can log in as this user back into the Azure portal. Okay, so now we're going to log back into the Azure portal and create a service principal. Now the service principal is the user that will have access granted to them so they can call over to Power BI Embedded and generate report tokens. So in order to embed your report into a website, you need a report token. So we need a secure user that can do this. So you will need a Azure admin to complete these steps. So the first step you're going to do is click on Azure Active Directory, and we're going to do app registrations, and I'm going to do a new registration. So I have the name here. I have a cheat sheet for some of this. So I'm going to call this Power BI Embedded SP Service Principal. It's going to say web, and I'm going to say HTTPS. Whack whack, same thing. So I'm going to do my only tenant, Power BI Embedded, and I'm going to click register. So what this is doing, it's creating a user account in Azure. This is typically used for automation purposes. So now we have something called the application ID. So we need that value. We have a tenant ID. We need this value. And we need to generate a secret. So we're going to go to clients and secrets. We're going to do a new secret. Description, I'm going to call this Power BI Embedded. I'm going to say never. So if it does expire, you need to note it in some type of system so that you renew this secret. I'm going to copy the secret, and this is the only time you're going to see this secret, so you need to copy it. If you lose the secret, just go generate a new one. So once we click off this page, I'm going to click off and come back on. Well, you'll be able to, once you exit the page, you'll see it disappear. Then the next step inside here is giving this permissions to uh, call Power BI. So we're going to add a permission, and we're going to click on Power BI Service, and we're going to click on Delegated Permissions. So you can click Expand All, and I have a cheat sheet as to everything I need to set here. So these will be in the notes. So I'm going to go ahead and check off all these permissions to make sure we have the correct permissions set. The way I did this, I used the Power BI embedded URL, which created a test account. But I'm doing this by hand so you can see all the steps. And we'll quickly click all these off. I don't think any gateway, group, skip, metadata, skip, report, storage account, and tenant and workspace. So I'm going to add the permissions here, and you'll see the permissions have been updated. So I'll minimize this, and it might take a second for this to actually go ahead and get consent. So give it a few minutes, and what we're going to do next is create a security group. So I will pause the video and then go over and create a security group. Okay, so the next task we're going to do is create a security group. This is going to make managing some of the Power BI's features easier. So I'm going to go to the tenant and I'm going to pick groups. I'm going to create a new group. So the group I'm going to create is Power BI Embedded group, security. I'm going to group name, group description, and I'm going to click members. And what I'm going to do is actually enter that service account I created, the Power BI Embedded Service Principal. Should be a member of this. I'm going to hit select and I'm going to hit create. So again, this will have to be done by Azure AD Admin. And at this point, we're done with most of the Azure side of things. So we're going to jump over to Power BI. So I will jump over there. Okay, so the next step we want to do is go to PowerBI.com. So I'm going to open an anonymous browser, go to app.powerbi.com, and then from there I want to sign in with my username that I created before. Click Next, enter my password. Now, if this is the first time you're signing into PowerBI.com, it will go through and create a Power BI account for you. So you'll have to go through some steps, but basically you'll end up here. Now, what we want to do is create a workspace. And if we look, when we create a workspace, it's going to say we can't create a workspace because it's only available for Pro. So I'm going to do a free trial, which lets me start a trial to create a workspace. Now I'll refresh, and I'm going to go back to here to workspaces and see if I can create a workspace, and I can create a workspace. Okay, so Power BI is configured to work. So the next step will be going back in Azure portal. So I will pause the video and go into the portal. Okay, the next step we will be doing is configuring Power BI to use a service principal. You will probably need a Power BI admin to do this, so that's something an admin person will need to do. So log into app.powerbi.com. We have our free pro trial. We're going to click the gear icon. We're going to go to the admin portal. Inside the admin portal, I'm going to go to tenant settings. I'm going to scroll all the way down to the bottom, and I'm going to look for developer settings, and I'm going to click allow service principals to use Power BI's APIs. So I want to enable this, and then I want to do a specific security group. So that security group that we created, we want to add them here, which should resolve, and we're going to hit apply. Okay, so that will take some minutes to take effect, and then we're going to create a Power BI workspace. So again, we're in app.powerbi.com, and now we need to create a workspace. So if you click on workspaces and select create a workspace, we can give this any name you like, but we're going to call this our embedded reports workspace, and we're going to hit save. So you will see over here on the left, you have embedded reports. You're going to click the dot, 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 and we need to click workspace access. So you need to go get your service principal, which should have been created, and we will pick them. And we need to add them as an admin. So we'll click add, and now we have an admin. So this means this service principal will be able to run the reports contained in this workspace. So we need to make sure we set that security option. All right, our next step will be publishing a report to this workspace. So we will open Power BI and start to publish a report. Okay, so now we're going to go to our workspace in app.powerbi.com, and we want basically create a sample report. So we can go to sample dataset. You can click files and you can do samples. And let's just say we want to do an IT spend sample and hit connect. So this will take a little while. So you can see it's bringing in data depending upon your speed. So let's make sure that it's in our workspace. So we're going to go back to embedded reports and we go to here, reports, and we have a sample report. Okay, so now we're ready to start the embedding process. To do the embedding, we need a couple fields here. So if you look on the report, so we went to Workspace, Embedded Reports, we clicked on Reports, and we clicked on the report itself. Up here, we have a couple pieces of information that we will need. So inside here, we're going to have the first GUID here is our Workspace ID. And then our second GUID here is actually a report ID. Okay, so we need these values so we can generate a token that we can embed into a web page. So we will open a sample application that's on the GitHub site, and we will start to test the report embedded in a web page. Okay, so now we're ready to test our Power BI application. This is going to use Visual Studio, so you can either follow along if you'd like, or you can watch it just to understand what's happening, but it's not necessary since we'll be deploying an Azure function to do this work. So we will come in here and download the sample, and you can click clone. You can clone it if you like, or just download a zip file. Once the zip file is downloaded, we can make sure we might have to unblock the zip file, so you might want to check that, unblock, hit OK, and we can close this and unzip the file. And inside here, you'll see app owns data. This is the one we want to actually test, so you can drag this out into your desktop or any area you'd like. And then we're going to go inside app owns data and open this in Visual Studio. We need to change a few settings in the web config, so let's see what happens. We probably will restore the NuGet packages and we'll make our web config settings so we can run our report. So first thing you might want to do is rebuild the solution. Let's see what happens. So let's come up here and do restore NuGet packages. See if it's restoring the packages. So if you go to your package manager under tools, NuGet package manager, you can see this manager and it should restore the packages. Let's build it again. Check our error list. Okay, so we're going to run it, or we'll edit the web config in a second for our own values, but let's just make sure it runs. Okay, sometimes you'll see this error, the Roslyn compile error. So what we need to do here is come back, project, build. You can clean the solution. Sometimes this fixes it, and you build and rebuild the solution. And then let's see if we can run it again. If not, we'll have to correct the error. Okay, so it worked. We're going to click on Embed Report, which will throw an error because we haven't updated the web config. If you keep getting that browse and compile error, you can exit Visual Studio and go back in. Sometimes that fixes it, but we can go through the fix if we need to. In terms of changing the web config, so what we want to do is go to our authentication type, change this to service principal, and we need to go get our values that we had in our text document. So we'll open up our notepad and I need to get the application ID. So this is the application ID, basically our service principal ID. We're going to get our workspace ID. So this is from our Power BI URL, and we need to put this inside here. We need the report ID, which is also from our Power BI workspace. So when you are on the web, we copy these values, and then we need to set a couple other values here. We need the tenant. So in order for our service principal to know where to log into, we need to specify the tenant. And then in order for the service principal to log in, we need a secret, which is the password for the service principal. So quick review, we set the authentication type to service principal. We do our service principal application ID. We do our workspace and report ID from Power BI. Remember, this service principal is an admin of this workspace. And then what we're going to do is pass in the application's secret, which is the password, and we're telling it the tenant, which is your Azure AD tenant, which basically lets the system know where to go check this username and password against. So we're going to run this again, and this time we should be able to click the report and see if it's working. So we're going to click Embed Report, and hopefully we get the report. Great. So we got the same report that's on PowerBI.com. And just to show you what's happening, I'll give you a quick overview of what's happening inside this project. Let me maximize this. There's a couple pieces inside here that are important. So if you look at the services and you go to the embed service, inside this embed service, the important step here is these 3 lines of code. So this is after it authenticates to Azure with the service principal, it goes to Power BI and gets a token. So in order to run a report on the web page, if we go to Views and we go to Home and Embed Report, this Embed Report has a couple pieces inside here that we'll look at. It has an access token, embed URL, and a report ID. So these 3 values are passed from this service to this web page. And then with those values, this config is passed to Power BI JavaScript to embed the report. So this config value here, which contains the token, access token, embed URL, gets passed into the Power BI embed function. We'll look at this a little more detail in the simplified JavaScript. So if I run this again, I will just go back to the web page and I will refresh. And you'll see we'll get an embed token, a embed URL, and a report ID. So we're going to quickly look at these things in the debug window. So if we go to the immediate window, we can look what these values look like. Oops. Don't know if I can get there right now. Embed token, that token. I think that's a string, but we'll take a look. So this is the embed token string, which is a key that lets the web page see the report. The URL is just a string value, and this is telling it the path of this report. So this token lets this report be viewed, and then we have a report ID, and oops. Config that ID, which is the report ID. I think think I click the play button to continue, but that would be the report ID. So what happens is these values get passed to this web page, and then inside the web page, they're passed to this function, which is a JavaScript from Power BI that is provided, and then it actually embeds a report into the web page, so you see the report. So if you wanted to find out the tokens of the page, this is typically where I'm looking. The code up here is basically calling to Azure to authenticate against Azure, and then it's calling Power BI to loop through and get these tokens. So what we want to do is actually create an Azure function to do this, so we can call this from a web page directly. So I'm going to stop and we'll pause the video, and we'll go ahead and create an Azure function. The next step in the process is creating an Azure function. The reason we're going to create an Azure function is because we want to hide the logic of getting the Power BI embed tokens from web pages that are calling it. Our web page will be using JavaScript, and we don't want the web page to have the service principal, username, key, and all that exposed in the actual web page. So you would download this from GitHub, and I have a Power BI embedded sample project, and you can open this project. In order to do Azure Functions, just so you're aware, you will have to install Azure Functions local development. So you can go to this website, which I will open up real quick, and there's two requirements. One, you have to install Node. So there's a link here to install Node, and then after Node is installed, you need to run this command from a prompt, and that will install the core tools. So if you need help with that, there's lots of help on the internet, but I've already installed that. So the piece I come in here, I'm gonna come in here, and if it's empty, you want to open up this local settings .json. So we're going to come inside here, and we're going to take our values, and we're going to replace the values. So we're going to get the application ID. So we'll paste that in there. The workspace ID, which is this value again. The application secret, which we need. And the tenant, so we know where to go resolve this secret against, which is right up here. And you might have to restore NuGet packages, but now we should be able to run the application. So we'll start a node window here. And now what we want to do is get the URL that it shows you in the window. So we copy this URL. You can use any tool you want, but I have a tool called Postman. But we want to call this URL with a REST endpoint. So Postman's a tool that you can download. You can hit this in a browser, but we'll quickly take a look at Postman. So what we want to do is paste the URL in here, and we need to pass in a key. So I'll look at the code real quick. So what this code is doing is doing the same thing that the other code we went through is doing, but I simplified it just so we pass in a report ID. So we want to pass in a report ID. It's going to do the same logic as the sample application. And then we want to do a report ID. So copy this report ID, paste it in here, and we hit send. So if this code works, we'll get back our embed token. So we're getting back an embed token, an embed URL, and the report ID. So this is working. You can copy this URL as well. Should work in a browser. Take a quick look. If I paste this in a browser, you'll get the same values back. So you don't need Postman. What you'll need to do is basically create this URL, the localhost report ID in this, and you can know if this is working. Okay, so the next piece we'll be doing is publishing this function to Azure. Okay, so now we're going to go back in the Azure portal. I'm going to use my Microsoft account for this because my other tenant, I don't have an Azure subscription or that. So I will go ahead and use my default Microsoft account. I'm going to create a resource, and I'm going to create a resource group. So if you're working in an organization, you might need an admin to create a resource group. And we'll name this, let me go into my subscription. and I'm going to call this Atom Power BI Embedded. And right now it doesn't matter what area I'm creating this in. So typically an admin will create this resource group for you, and then they'll make you a contributor to the resource group. So go ahead and create this resource group, and we can hit go to resource group. And what I want to do now is create an Azure function. So if you come in here and hit create, type function app, we're going to hit create, and we want to put it in the subscription, the resource group. Function app name will be test Power BI embed. See if that works. 01. Okay, so we're going to copy that, and that's going to be our function name. So we have that function name. Select the runtime stack. We'll do .NET Core, Central US. There's other settings here, hosting. It's going to create a storage account for us, which we'll use. So we'll actually go on that storage account. We'll do Windows. We're going to do a consumption plan, which means this will be charged every time it's called. So it doesn't stay up and running, so there's no charge while you're not using it. So we're going to hit review and create, and go ahead and do create. Okay, so this will submit the deployment, and it will be a few seconds here before the function app is created. So I will pause the video and jump back when it's done. Okay, so now we're going to look at the function app. It should have provisioned. If you want to find your function app, you can come in the Azure portal, and inside here, the hamburger menu probably has function app, and we called it test Power BI Embedded 01. So the function app's up and running. So we actually want to go back to Visual Studio. We're going to right click on the report token, and we're going to hit publish. We're going to do the consumption plan, which is the one we did, and we're just going to select an existing one. Typically, again, someone else will provision this for you, or you can provision it in the portal, but creating a new one, sometimes the security is not granted to you. So it picks my subscription resource group. I believe I called it Atom Power BI Embedded, and we have our test Power BI. So we're going to hit OK. So it's going to basically give us the publish button, and this will compile our code and push this up to Azure. So when this is done, the function will be deployed, but we do need to go set some variables inside the function so we can pass in those parameters. We've been changing the report ID, the application ID. Those settings need to be set up in the portal. So I will do that in 1 minute once it's published. Let's see what it's doing. And in the portal, you will see the function get published, and it will say it's read-only because it's been published from Visual Studio. So it's still publishing, and just takes a minute. Okay, so now it says read-only. All right, so it's been published. It's not going to work yet because we got to set some parameters. So we're going to click on the function here, test Power BI, and we're going to go to configuration. And what we need to do is take the values. We have to add new application settings. So we want the values from Visual Studio. If we go to our local host settings, we need to take each one of these values and do a new application setting. So we'll do the first one. You can fast forward this if you need to, but I'm just going to go ahead and do these one by one. The next one's the application ID and new application setting. Okay, workspace ID. URL. So you get the trailing slash, resource URL. App URL. If you forget one, you will get an error when you run the application. Typically, we'll tell you which one you forgot. So So this secret, some people will put this secret in Key Vault, but that's for another discussion. But right now it's being put inside these configuration settings. The last two aren't totally needed, but what happens is there's a check to see if they exist in the code. So we're just going to put them in there as well. Okay. So we should have all the settings in here. You can click Show Values, take a look at the settings. If you need any changes, you can change them, and you should be able to hit Save. So the only value that's not going in the web config is the report ID, and that's what we want to pass in. So we will run the function and pass that in. Okay, to run the function, we want to go back to our function app. You can click on Functions and let it expand for a second. And there's a test button inside here that we can actually test it. So it says Run right here. So you want to click the Run button. And request body, you can either add a parameter and say report ID. So we could say report ID and pass in a value. And we can have to scroll down and click Run. And ideally, we'll see the output in the bottom right here. Okay, so it worked. You can see the embed token and everything has been returned back to us. So that's good news. So we have our embed token and the function is actually working. So our next step will be to test this from a web page. So we will test it coming up next. So now we're going to deploy a simple web app. So we have our function app. I'm in the Azure portal. If we click on, we're just going to go to our resource groups. You can get to it by clicking here or going to the menu and finding your resource group. When the resource group was created, it created a storage account. So we're just going to borrow this storage account as a temporary web server. So we want to create a new container. We'll just call it PowerBI. And we'd say private access, so we can hit OK. And it creates a container. You want to click on the container, and we want to upload a file. So we're going to browse to the JavaScript file that Power BI provided. So let me go to the samples. I will go to the JavaScript, and there's Power BI min.js. So this is a minified version of the file, and we want to upload it. Now you won't be able to access this file because it's protected. So what we want to do is click on this, and we want to create a shared access signature, which is a SAS token. We're going to start it, just click it one day behind, and this could be a few years in advance. So I'll just click a few months away, and you can limit it to a certain IP address, but really we just want to go ahead and do HTTPS and generate a SAS token. So this SAS token right here, we copy this, and we want to paste this into one of the files. So inside our solution, we have our Power BI embedded JavaScript. There's an index HTML. So right here, we have a source file, and this is the Power BI minified script. So we want to paste that inside that script. The next piece we want to do is get our Azure function name. So we saved the Azure function name, which was test Power BI 01, and we want to replace the name with this. We also need to get the function code. So let's go over to the Azure function. We can go to the function app, click on the function, and inside here, you're going to click on the function name, and there'll be a link here to say get a function URL. I'll copy it, and we will paste it. So it's the function name, Azure Websites API Power BI token. That should We just need to replace this part, and then we get a code. So this is a code that protects the function. So no one can call this function unless they have this secret code, and we're going to put that inside this page. So let me go through this page for you. This is really the pure basic page. We have the title. We have an input button. So here we're going to click a button to run a report. So I probably need to update this to say replace me. And we want to go get the report ID. So we have the report ID. So there'll be a button on the web page. You're going to click the button, and underneath the button there's a container, and this is going to be where the Power BI report will show up. So this is really the most simplistic web page you can generate to run a Power BI embedded report. So if you're doing Angular or some other framework, you can come in here and get the various pieces to run this. You need jQuery, so nothing special about the version of jQuery in this. You need to put your Power BI min on your web server, CDN, or Azure Storage. So we did Azure Storage. And then we need to give the function app and the code. So what this is going to do, you're going to click the button, it's going to call run report. It's going to pass some JSON, which is the report ID, up to the function app. If the AJAX call is successful, it's going to come to this success promise. It's going to say, were we successful with the status of success? And it's going to get those three values we've seen from the function. The function returns the embed token, embed URL, and the report ID. We just have to call this line of code. It's necessary. Here's the config that is for embedding the report. So here's how we have access token, our embed URL, and a report ID. We grab a handle to this container. That's the container up here. So this is the container in our web page. So we need to get a handle for that. And we are right here. Then what we're going to do is we're going to take the container and the config file and call PowerBI-Embed, and it will put the report into there. So let's save this, and we're going to upload this file as well to the storage account. So back to the Azure portal, you can go to your function app. Inside here, you'll click on the resource group. So if you want to use the same storage account, we're going to hijack this storage account just for a web server purpose, Power BI. And what we want to do is upload and select the file. We will select the index HTML and we will upload it. We will then generate a shared access token to run this as well. So we will generate a SAS token and we'll make it yesterday and we'll make it expire in the future. It's just fine. Oops, I didn't actually click it. So we'll click a date and we'll say generate the SAS token and we'll copy this token, the SAS URL. So we'll paste this down and we want to see if it will work. It shouldn't work. There's one thing we do have to do. So let's see if we get the web page. So we get the web page and we click to run the report and you'll see you get an error. So if you hit F12, you'll probably get a CORS error. See this allow cross origin error not allowed. So you want to copy this part of your path, the storage account name, go over to your Azure function, which is your function app. We can click the breadcrumb here. You can go to function platform features. Sorry, go to CORS, and we want to add that origin as a CORS. And let's see here. I think it can't end with a slash, so we should be okay now. Should be able to hit save, let it update, and then we could try the sample again. Hopefully it fixes itself that quick. It takes a few seconds for it to realize it. So I think it's running now. You see this is just saying we don't have a favorite icon, which is no big deal. So you can hit F12 or close this. And now we have our Power BI report embedded. I clicked the button twice, that's why it flashed. And then you can do your filters and you now have your report embedded in a basic web page. So you're free to put this inside an Angular app. There's some third-party tools. You can embed this in Power App. So wherever you can run some JavaScript, this will let you embed this into a web page. And the secrets are all protected. So the secrets are all protected behind the Azure Function app. So you don't have the key or any of this information exposed. So we keep all this information secret, and then we're just passing the report ID to the Azure function, which is a GUID, so people really can't guess them. And they also need the function key to actually call your function app. So that concludes the demo. So if you have any questions or issues with the GitHub, please go ahead and create an issue on GitHub to let me know, and I will try to address them. Thank you.